Minecraft is a wonderfully simple game, and the beauty is that everything can be worked out just by playing. Except that's wrong. Almost everybody finds themselves watching the game being played at some point, yourself included, which is great for learning about a feature, but leads to you missing many of the idiosyncrasies of the settings and controls, which are enabled by default but cause huge problems, such as trying to emote when you're being attacked by a creeper, such as not being able to see anything in the end, and the worst of all is that the Nether is filled with far too many mobs, something that looks like it's just a casual Minecraft bug we've been waiting them to fix for 5 years, but you can fix it yourself right now with a simple setting. And indeed, in this video, I wanted to give you some of these tips that aren't obvious in videos, but are going to help out your game a lot. And let's start with one that can be done in just 10 seconds. Go to your settings right now, and I guarantee, unless you're playing on a tiny phone, there are 3 things that will improve your quality of life, but are not default settings, even on an Xbox or PC. The first is go to video settings and then GUI Scale. This is set hilariously large by default. Genuinely, it's a problem to see anything on the screen because it's also big. You can set this to -1. The scale only goes from 0 to -1. Don't ask me why it's so small. Also, the FOV is set to 60 by default, which means that if we look at my giant sandstone tunnel floating in the end, we can just about see the edges of it right now. But if we set this up to just 70, the standard for most FPS games, then you'll see a lot more and you'll probably be more comfortable. If you want, you could set this as high as you're comfortable. All the way at 110, you can see even more than this. But in general, if you want to play other games as well as Minecraft, I recommend 70 to 75 as a nice place to settle. Speaking of nice places to settle, I think the way Minecraft sets your brightness is one of the weirdest default settings. On Java, when you go to old versions, this is set to 0, and on Bedrock it is set to 50 by default, which should be good for certain viewing conditions, but it means anytime you go into a cave or the Nether or the end, you're going to have a terrible time. Set this to 90 or 100 and you'll have a much better time seeing basically everything. Being in the end really sucks because Endermen are very sensitive to being looked at, especially on Bedrock, where I feel like even when you're sure you haven't looked at one, immediately one will decide you have. These are some of the strongest enemies in Minecraft, and please stop. I'm not trying to look at you right now, and unless you have fireworks or an easy way out, this can be the end of your game. So what is the solution? Well, for lots of people, I think they find it handy to have the carved pumpkin, but the downside of the carved pumpkin is even though when you look at an Enderman, they don't notice that you're looking at them because of the big thing in your head, you basically can't see anything else. Okay, he's still mad at me from earlier, but but most Endermen, you can see even when you look them directly in the face, they're not going to know it's you because of this handy dandy item. But there's such a big downside to this that can be avoided by either playing third person. I think this is handy, but if you like first person, then you might be able to get around this restriction by using a texture pack. These are available outside of the marketplace if you're not on a console. Pro tip, keep that in mind if you want one for free, but if you are willing to spend a little on the marketplace, you can find the Master Chief mashup. This is one of the OG mashups, and it's one of the handiest because it gives you access to not just an energy sword, but a HUD for the the carved pumpkin, which looks like you've got a helmet on. I think this is a really cool effect, but also it's so easy to see while you've got this. But it's not just the Master Chief pack and the official first party ones. There's also the Storytime texture pack, which I do need to remind you I have a very slight interest in. They made a few things cat themed for me, which was very nice. But if you want, the Storytime texture pack will also give you access to a much less cluttered HUD, which means you can see things just great, like I am right now. Much easier to kill Enderman when there's just a tiny, faintly lit outline of a cat than one of a pumpkin. And you know what? We can combine these 2 tips together about the end, and we could turn up our brightness as well as this, and you know what that would result in? Wow, are we going to see things much better and much clearer? Yes, we are. That makes me a very happy carved pumpkin. Okay, so other things that will help you out a lot. One of these is one of the most important settings in Minecraft is not actually customizable from within the game. You would have noticed, no doubt, that I changed all of my settings, my FOV, my video settings from within Minecraft, but you can't change one of the fundamental world settings this way, so you'll want to change it when you're starting a new world, or more importantly, loading up an existing one. Do you love going to the Nether, but hey, just how many mobs end up spawning around you? Well, did you know this is actually a Bedrock issue? It is specifically this bug right here, and it's been filed for years at this point, and honestly, every time I look, I'm subscribed to the thread, there's hundreds of responses, but Mojang have not managed to fix it yet, although sometimes it looks like the game can fix itself. That was very beautiful, I have to say, but Mojang have not fixed this one yet, and it's very crucial they do because of hardcore coming to the game. But something interesting I read when I last went through the report was there's this tiny little section about, actually, did you know this issue only occurs if you have one particular simulation distance applied. Simulation distance is something most users are not aware of on any real level, but as you can see, by the way, literally the ghast died and another one has already taken its place because that is how crazy this seems to be. Speaking of crazy, I think we might activate a totem. Sorry about this. Oh, no, it's great. We're on a backup. Speaking of great, something that is less than great is the fact that mobs spawn too frequently in the Nether is a bug that has existed since 1.16.100, but what is great is this year they actually gave it an update. They didn't fix it, which is what I was hoping for, but they did clarify what the problem was and a temporary solution. So did you know that the main problem with this bug is the fact that mob spawning and despawning rogues changed in 1.16 to have higher overall density in the Nether? This was an accident, it was unintended effects. Also higher frequency of mobs spawning very close to the player after the player kills nearby mobs. Due to the above, the impact of pre-existing bugs that affect spawning and player experience, which is very bad. And all they kind of said to this is that, well, actually, because of simulation distance increases, all you have to do is have a simulation distance higher than 4, and it will solve this. Perhaps this is why this isn't a high priority bug. Again, if it's been 5 years, you can tell it's clearly not at the very top of their priority list, because it only affects players playing on 4 simulation distance, and that might sound like a weird thing because there are 5 simulation distance options. So for a brief rundown, if you don't know what simulation distance is, it's something that is always running alongside render distance. Render distance decides how much of the world you can see. I can see all the way down to there, quite clearly. However, simulation distance refers to what the game actually counts as being loaded in, and so runs the things in those chunks. Things like fire spreading, TNT exploding, mob spawning, etc. And so when your simulation distance is set to 4, only 4 chunks around you can spawn in mobs, and when it's set so low, it means that they're very likely to spawn there, and the easy solution to this is up your simulation distance. This is done differently depending on whether you're starting a world or changing an existing one. So in a brand new world, it looks like this. Down here in the advanced settings, there is simulation distance, which goes from 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. As you can see, it gives you the number of blocks down there as well. But if you've got an existing world, you can still do it because it is a slider you've got to change. This slider can go from 4 to 6 to 8 to 12. Why would you ever want it down below 12? 1, it makes it easier to find certain mobs nearby you, but 2 is the fact that it will increase, or rather decrease your FPS, but increase the resources required. So simulation distance 12 might work great on a high-end PC or the Series X after the update, but it might work very poorly if you try to play anything near that on the Nintendo Switch or your nan's old iPhone 7 that for some reason still receives Minecraft updates. And so with that said, keep that in mind. Simulation distance is one of those incredibly valuable parts of the Minecraft experience that almost nobody talks about. There does seem to be more awareness about this now that the setting is available in Java 2, but too many people don't realize what it actually will affect because it's not just mob spawning, but also things you really might care about. So a furnace is something great to set and forget, especially when you're smelting the most important thing in the game, diamond ore. This is the best way to get diamonds, by the way. But something you might not know is if you race out the simulation distance, it actually won't work anymore. So while I'm over here, let's say working on a giant project, I might assume that my 64 diamonds, or maybe even more if I've got a hopper system, are smelting, but if I go back there now, you'd expect me to have, what, like 3 or 4 diamonds? But if I race back in, only the time spent within 4 chunks of my furnace will count, which means that despite all of that time being spent, I have just 2 diamonds, which makes no sense. How did only 4 seconds pass in that last 30? And the answer is the magic of simulation distance, which means that anything that you can see is not actually existing, it's just a visual anomaly. You can actually see this interestingly with, say, leaves. Leaves have a version that you can see, and then they have a version of a block which actually renders in when they are within your simulation distance, which looks just a little bit nicer. This is something that's painfully obvious with the spyglass. Take a look at these leaves. Do you see how you can see through them to the tree? This semi-transparency works as long as there's not multiple leaf blocks on every single side. However, take a look at these ones in the distance and you'll see, oh, they're just solid green. There is a weird moment where lots of these textures will pop in, and that is the moment where things are actually being simulated, which means leaves are actually a good tool to work out if something is real, you know, if it exists and is being simulated, or if it is just a visual anomaly. So we can look through here and see those ones over there are not, and these ones over here are, so maybe that's a useful technique for you. Personally, one of my favorite methods is this, the mega chest. Something fun about Minecraft is that chests are counted as an entity. I do not know why, but you lag the game if you have too many chests, something that feels very unintuitive, but as you can see, as you get away from the chests, about 64 blocks away, they will de-render, which means something very weird happens, which means the chests look like they're slowly destroying themselves, and you can see right through them to those fake trees behind, but if we actually try to go that way, this will happen. You can do something very, very fun with this if you want to troll your friends, because imagine this, right? You've got a big diving board set up with your friends, and you say, hey, try jumping into the water now. Your friend looks down and they see that there is clearly water there, and so they jump, and do you know what happens in the end? They die falling onto a chest. This does seem very abusable, and honestly, I am glad that it's not. It's mostly just me doing silly things like this, because this is one of the weirdest optical illusions of Minecraft. What is happening to these chests slowly? And the answer is they're not being simulated. Speaking of not being simulated, one of the fun things about Minecraft is the fact that there are lots of different controls which the game will not actively tell you about. And one of the biggest example of these are F keys. The only F key that Minecraft directly mentions in the controls is F5, which is used to change perspective. This is very, very handy, but if you play Minecraft on a controller, obviously a lot of these don't apply to you, but on a keyboard there are just all sorts of secret key bindings which don't have an equivalent on keyboard, phones or on controllers, but are very useful to know about regardless. F3 is of course the famous Java debug menu. This is not intentional. A lot of people disagree and don't like that fact, but it's true. But two pieces of information of that can come to Bedrock. One of these is the day counter and the other is coordinates. These work a lot better on Bedrock in my opinion. Here's the coordinates and day counter off, and if we go right back in there, you can see we can turn them right back on. Looks very nice if you ask me. So both of these settings are enableable, but the rest of it is not available on Bedrock and isn't meant to be available to anyone. And so next time you see it being used in a speedrun, it's fair. You know, it's the only thing that Minecraft does allow, but at the same time, it really, I think it's one of the biggest regrets Jeb has about the game is giving players debug screens so they can test the game, only for them to use them to help them beat the game a lot easier. But that's a point for another time. An interesting point about F3 is the fact that it's not the only F key alongside F5. We also have F1. This hides your HUD. This is great if you're a YouTuber. The only thing it doesn't hide, and one of the great reasons we're in the preview, is the preview text. That is something that is locked on your screen regardless. It's so that if you share videos of something, a developer can look at that and see how much memory you had, what your frame rate was, your graphics card and the build, etc, etc. It's useful information for developers, but it's slightly annoying for you. The only way to remove that is with an add-on, sadly. But yeah, F1 will hide all of your other HUD elements, including your status. As you can see, I've got the bad omen effect. It will hide your days played, your position, your hotbar, and everything else. You can still see yourself in third person, but nothing else. This is what YouTubers use to make thumbnails, and if you want to just have a version of your skin that isn't covered with all of this clutter, you might enjoy that too. Speaking of things you might enjoy, if you are playing with a controller, even on a PC, the F10 key, which used to be my recording key button, is what you can use to hide or show the tooltips. This is something you have to do if you're on a controller and don't have F keys. You have to go all the way in here and then go to hide controller hints. But yeah, this is something that you can do if you really want to. But personally, I think if you're new to a controller, these keys are very handy because it might reveal something that you didn't know you could do, like, wow, I can mine using this boat. For some reason, mine is an option, but it's not telling me I can place it as well. But yeah, so interestingly, the tooltips might be really useful for you for stuff like leave a boat using right stick rather than, and also boarding a boat using left trigger. There are all these sorts of things that might not be obvious that you might find handy, and that is why F10 might need to be turned off. Speaking of things that need to be turned off, I hope that you found this video useful. I wanted to keep it as fast and as brief as possible, so I'll say right now that I hope that you got something from this. If you did, don't forget to subscribe and see more weird tips about Minecraft. As you all know, I am the, I would say, one of the best sources to follow if you want Minecraft Bedrock videos that are intended for real adult human beings. And if you enjoy that mission, please do subscribe to see more of them. And I'm looking forward to the next update where I'm sure more weird settings will come and you can learn about them here on this channel alongside everything else in 1.21. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully you are too, because I'll see you in the next one if you will too. Bye.